great masters of terror have teamed up to take you for a ride. Christine, based on the best-selling novel by Stephen King, rated R. Now playing in a theater near you.
Christine, I'm begging you, please don't take my man.
Welcome to Roll Credits, a podcast about connections both in film and in life. I'm Aaron.
I'm Mandy.
Each episode we aim to explore a cast member, actor, director, or even a concept that ties a set of movies together. We talk about the history and the context. This is an Armbar Studios production. For more information on all of our projects, you can always visit armbarstudios.com. It is December 2nd. We are just around the corner from Christmas, and it is the winter time, and buddy, we are feeling it. I apologize if I sound a little stuffed up and nasal. It's because I am. How are you feeling?
Don't at me.
Yeah, it's nasty over here.
Well, if I'll say this, we were planning to get this episode out sooner than December 2nd. And let's just say we had a busy November, and then also we had colds. So
yeah, we are here. We are powering through, and we're going to make it happen because this is our Stephen King Adaptations arc. We have done Carrie, and this is 1983's Christine. We'll also be doing Stand By Me, Misery, The Mangler, and It. So Christine is the touching tale of a car and her boy, and the lengths that car will go to kill anyone who stands between them. This was a lot of fun. I feel like this is the joke one. You know, like people look at Stephen King and they think, oh, this guy's like, what if a car was haunted?
I mean, to be fair, Stephen King does a lot of this. Yeah. And we're going to get to that soon.
Okay.
But, before we even get into Christine, last we left off, actually, we were about to watch Carrie the Musical. Do we want to talk about that a little?
Absolutely. Before we begin, let's talk a little bit about that. Yeah, last episode we did Carrie.
Let me just say, let me start off by saying I loved it. Oh, yeah. I always love musical theater, but I'm very happy I got to watch this one finally.
Oh, it was just fun for me because, growing up, I would go to a lot of high school productions, and our drama teacher made sure those high school productions felt like the biggest thing in the world. And this is a college production that we went to and very much enjoyed ourselves. It's funny because, you mentioned the negatives that were with the original Broadway production.
Yes. So I touched on it briefly last episode. Carrie was infamously the Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark of its time.
Yeah.
It was literally this punchline in the musical theater world. There's a book about flops on Broadway literally called Not Since Carrie.
Oh.
Yeah. I also forgot to mention this for Carrie, but Lawrence D. Cohen, the screenwriter for the 70s movie, actually wrote the initial script for Carrie the Musical with Dean Pitchford and Michael Kor doing the music for it. Super fascinating production. I would highly recommend the YouTube video from Waiting in the Wings about it. There's also like a podcast and a book on the subject released in the last 5 years called Out for Blood. That just covers the revival project there. Now, one of the most insane moments really in the production of Carrie, like how it, when they were first making it in the 80s. So one of the first directors they had on board asked the people doing the music, like, what they should do for costumes. And then the music people said, well, we were thinking Grease. And then the director was thinking, oh, of course, Grease. So let me go ahead and bring in togas.
Oh,
and
no.
let me go ahead and set up these pillars here. He manages to order all this shit and he brings it to the stage rehearsal. And it's not until then that the music people are just looking at this like, what the fuck happened? We were talking about the musical.
God, that's just like something that you'd see in This Is Spinal Tap, like with the Stonehenge sequence with the really tiny Stonehenge. Like, it's that kind of misdirection. But that's really funny. I know that also you mentioned that in the original musical, like the original run, they messed up the pig's blood scene by having someone run out with a cup of blood. I'm very, 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 very happy to report that in the version we saw on the college stage, there was an actual bloodbath.
There was so many cool things, I think, with this new version versus the original take.
Yeah, so we actually really enjoyed this new revamped version. I don't want to make this about a breaking everything down about Carrie the musical thing, but give us the highlights here, because I think there's a lot that we enjoyed and some stuff that I wasn't as keen on that I think is really just kind of a product of it having to be based on the original musical in the first place.
I love that they made a musical number for Chris.
Uh-huh.
Now, it was a local production, so it's hard to say if we got the full experience, but I do think that the team put on a great performance.
The actress for Chris was incredible. She's gonna show up in a movie with Rachel Sennott one day. I guarantee it.
All things considered, too, I really liked how they handled the character of Sue. She and Tommy are made to be even more innocent than they are in the movie. Also, they have Sue as sort of the narrative character in the new one. Which,
right. That was a surprising shift to me, but I believe that's also kind of how the book is, kind of something of like a questioning or police procedural-ish thing. Flashback kind of deal.
They even carry over one of the major ending scenes from the book, from what I could tell. So that's cool.
Yeah.
Only major gripe I have, I feel like it downplays the teacher's complicitness in everything.
Yeah, I agree. The teachers, I definitely think, are much stronger in the movie because I think that it's really important to the story of Carrie that everyone sucks and no one is listening to her.
Yes.
And the teachers just kind of don't become much of a character. The principal is removed, stuff like that.
It's time to talk about killer cars.
Killer cars. So,
killer cars without a single person behind them.
So we've seen this movie before this.
Yes. Our history with Christine. This was our final horror movie of October 2022.
That's right. Yeah, because, we do our horror marathons in our horror month. And that was the one that we chose to bring us through until November 1st. And it was a great choice. It's a lot of fun. In fact, I think I liked it better the second time.
You know what? I understand that.
Okay. I liked it about as much, but there was a fond familiarity to it.
It's so weird to me that a lot of people just straight up did not care for it.
That's funny.
Funny enough, Stephen King and John Carpenter included in that list.
That's super funny for a lot of reasons that we'll get into.
Not one of King's best, I'll say that. I think, if we were stacking all of the Stephen King movies, next to each other, you may ask, you got, a whole list of these movies. Why did you put Christine in, this 6?
Right.
To me, it stuck with us, and this is one that I know I pushed for, but you completely agreed.
Yeah.
I don't feel like enough people really talk about it.
Absolutely not. And I think that, what I love when I'm watching a movie is when I'm watching something considered, quote, low art, but I find something of high, I guess, theory or high intrigue in it. And I love talking about that more than anything. Anyone can, lavish praise on a movie that they, that is critically well received. And we love a good critically well received movie. But I don't think either of us will disagree that one of our or two of our best episodes were The Lost Boys and Batman Forever, because I just love taking these movies and understanding, like, what is the appeal here? What is interesting about these movies? What is tickling our brain that did not tickle the brain of the mass public, you know?
And I have a controversial take because I've been listening to the audiobook in preparation for this podcast. I like the original book. There's a lot of themes that didn't carry over as strongly to the movie, maybe. At the same time, Dennis is kind of more of a dick in the book. I actually think that this one handles characterization a little better, and also it's a little more fun to me.
Absolutely. And that is something that this movie has in spades, is a lot of fun. And we'll talk about that for sure, because I think that this movie does have just a lot of style, a lot of just atmosphere, and a lot of energy. And I think that's what kind of made it really appealing for us to try and go back and revisit.
Are you ready to jump into the story this time?
I am so excited to hear about the story. Tell me about the story of Christine.
Again, so this is about Stephen King adaptations, specifically. So we're going to be talking about the history of Stephen King adaptations this time. Sources I have this time includes Dread Central, StephenKing.com, an interview with Stephen King for LOfficer.com, and an interview with John Carpenter for SFX. Now, with the success of Carrie, did come a string of books in the 70s and 80s that studios were chomping at the bit to adapt. So if 1976's Carrie wasn't the catalyst that started King-mania in the 80s, or even the 1979 miniseries for Salem's Lot, then it was almost certainly the second feature film adaptation of King's work, which was The Shining.
Of course, yeah, absolutely.
Now, Kubrick's adaptation to this day is one of the most beloved adaptations of King's work. Although it, too, is, divisive for King, Stanley Kubrick did change both the ending and the message to this story, and kept the supernatural elements a little more low-key than the books had. What was initially really one of Stephen's most personal and cathartic novels that touched on everything that he loved and all of his big regrets. It was kind of taken and shaped by Kubrick. And to tell the truth, I don't think Kubrick was wrong necessarily in how he adapted it.
I mean, it's a fantastic film by all metrics, with like multiple all-time great horror performances and incredible set design and all of that, and I just don't love it.
And I've heard so many stories about Kubrick literally going from place to place watching this movie, and then if there was something that he didn't like, he would go to the editing room and then personally clip out parts of the film just to make it better. Like he would, this was to him, I think Kubrick considered this to be one of his masterpieces.
Right. Absolutely. And there's a lot of stories about the behavior on the set of The Shining. I believe that a lot of it is greatly exaggerated. But it's definitely just a really intense film by all accounts. I think it's a rightful classic. But I do agree with anyone who may not be happy with the final product in comparison to the book.
All that to say, The Shining was a huge sore spot for King for that reason, which is why he later on readapted the story as a miniseries. But regardless of his opinion on The Shining, between Stephen's work constantly making it on the bestsellers lists and several adaptations of his proving to be surefire hits. One thing that happened after The Shining was that people were rushing to work with his material. You can call his work really the MCU of his time, because so many prolific directors were being brought on just for the sole purpose of adapting King books. So I mentioned Brian De Palma. We mentioned Stanley Kubrick. But Stephen also wrote an anthology with one of horror's greatest auteurs.
George Romero.
George A. Romero,
Yes.
who was coming hot off the success of both Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead at the time. And then in his first year, all of this came to a head, as in 1983, 3 separate studios all raced to pump out a different King adaptation that year. Louis Teague, best known at the time for the hit indie horror film Alligator, was brought on by Warner Brothers to adapt Cujo, which was based on King's 1981 book about a killer dog. David Cronenberg, coming off of both Shivers and Scanners, was given the reins by Paramount to King's 1979 psychic mystery thriller, The Dead Zone. And finally, Columbia Pictures had the feature film rights to King's killer car feature film, Christine.
We've actually seen all of those.
I haven't seen The Dead Zone. What are you talking about?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was mixing it up with the dark half. Continue.
And finally, Columbia Pictures had the feature film rights to King's killer car feature, Christine, with the novel dropping a mere 8 months before the film adaptation.
Oh, wow. Yeah, they were pumping them out, huh?
Yeah.
I mean, that's why we chose to do this.
For their adaptation, they signed on arguably the greatest horror director who ever lived. Really in his prime, I would say.
Yeah.
Although I'll say that reputation that he has now did not come for him back then. So John Carpenter.
Yes.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I just want to say he's just one of the all-time greats to me. To pretty much anyone. Even, a modern master like Jordan Peele says, whenever anyone tries to say, hey, has anyone ever had a better 3-film run? He's like, may I introduce you to our Lord and Savior, John Carpenter.
By 1983, John actually had Assault on Precinct 13 and Escape from New York, 2 beloved films that fall more in the category of action and thriller, but he had firmly established himself in the horror genre with films like The Fog, The Thing, and of course, Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
Now, unfortunately, John had actually fallen on hard times with the release of The Thing.
Yeah.
The film was actually a remake of one of John's favorite sci-fi flicks, The Thing from Another World. And although it's now seen as one of the best in the horror genre, it actually bombed both financially and critically when it first came out.
Oh, people hated it. Hated it. The effects were just too much for people, that it drowned out the rest of the excellent story.
It's one of those things where we can look at it now and say, okay, that there are more crazy effects now, but at the time, it was kind of like showing a caveman 2001: A Space Odyssey. Like, yeah, you can't do this.
But your kids are going to love it.
So John was actually desperate from work at the time, and he had accepted an offer from producer Richard Kobritz. Richard was actually the producer for the Salem's Lot miniseries I brought up. King actually liked it enough that he worked out a deal with Richard that he would send him the manuscripts for stories that he was writing, and told him that if there were any stories that Kobritz wanted to adapt, just to let him know. Now, the first story that gripped Kobritz was this one called Christine, about a boy's relationship with a supernatural car that transforms the boy in the process. King had actually gotten the inspiration for Christine one day as he turned onto his driveway and he saw the odometer roll over from 9,999 to 10,000. And the inspiration for the story struck him right then and there, where he thought about the idea of what if the odometer was, in essence, the car's age? And what if there was a story about an odometer that would go backwards, and every time it did, the car would be younger? So he thought of the idea as a short story that would be akin to like a supernatural American Graffiti. And then the more that he wrote and the longer that he got in, the more of a supernatural horror story it just became. Now, amazingly, the film was actually not the first time that Carpenter was set to direct a King adaptation, because originally Universal was going to have Carpenter follow up The Thing by having him direct an adaptation of King's novel Firestarter. But, after The Thing bombed, Universal actually kicked Carpenter out on it.
Oh, wow. Gave it to someone else.
And they replaced him with Mark L. Lester, best known for directing Class of 1984.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, still a pretty prominent horror guy.
Oh, yeah. No, I think they all knew, we need to get good horror directors to direct King's material.
I would say that even the weaker King movies that we've seen, I think, and this is kind of, again, what makes this arc so interesting is that, one, they all share the DNA pretty much of being directed by great horror directors. But also a lot of them share a lot of DNA from, Carrie onwards. It's like, I feel like by virtue of using kind of the Stephen King, I guess, style, it's sort of become its own almost house style that they have to put their own spin on. You compare it to the MCU, and it's very similar in that regard, where you can feel everyone's fingerprints over these movies for sure. But I would still kind of consider them all to be interestingly, noticeably Stephen King stories.
This is one thing that I'm really glad that we are covering a wide variety of directors and movies through this. Because one of the big questions is, well, who is the one that gels best with King's style? And I feel like with the ones that are directly written by him, yes, Maximum Overdrive and Pet Sematary are probably the most King adaptations. But at the same time, I feel like it's fascinating to see the people who can take and interpret his work from there. Now, from everything I read, it's unfortunately Carpenter really just felt like he got the scraps, because he was really interested in doing Firestarter after having read it. But Christine, he admitted that it was the only movie that he ever directed, not out of passion, but as a job.
It's kind of funny because, I think he did a great job. I think that this movie would have stunk without Carpenter.
To him, the big issue that he had is he just felt like it was almost impossible to make the car frightening.
That's funny because I don't agree. But continue.
It's hard to say whether or not his bitterness for Firestarter may have, painted his judgment on the movie. Genuinely seems like he was passionate about Firestarter. Well, but Carrie was but Christine is something that, I think, if you are removed from that context, it's hard to tell that it was made by a bitter person.
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't have known unless you had told me.
And there's a happy ending to it. To Universal's credit, they actually hired both John and Cody Carpenter to do the music for Firestarter 2022.
Yeah.
Basically a We're Sorry.
I wish he had directed that one too. From what I hear, it's not a very good movie, but you know what? The music's great.
And you know what?
Thank you, John.
And you know what? On top of it, Universal did actually release Halloween Ends. And the people who made that had actually other work, with Christine being the film that it pays tribute to the most. And you can kind of understand that. For all of Halloween Ends' faults, the writing.
Yes.
But I do think that you can kind of see the DNA there with the story of the one man kind of corrupted by
another
absolute evil.
Yes, exactly.
And then also even the junkyard scenes and all that. That's literally directly from this.
Absolutely. The bloom, the lens flare.
And anyways, I think that just about sums up Christine. John has bad memories of it. Stephen King has said in interviews that he was just disappointed with it because he felt like they could have done more. But, it has its fans, and most articles that I've found now just listed among some of their favorite King adaptations, and I always thought that was fascinating.
So you say that it has its fans. Did you know that two of its fans were Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert?
Excuse me.
Yeah, they both loved this movie. They both gave it a thumbs up. And we're talking about these guys who, are very much did not like John Carpenter's other work except Halloween. Or at least they didn't like Big Trouble in Little China and they hated The Thing. Right? Are infamously considered, as we've discussed, negative on horror. But let me just quote, I have some quotes here, both from the episode where they reviewed Christine, which thank you, SiskelEbert.org, for your usual work in making all of these available and searchable as best as you can. But also in Ebert's own text review here. So, Siskel says, I think the reason this movie works is because it's a great fantasy you wish was true, happening to someone else, but you wish it were true. And this actor, Keith Gordon, starts as a nerdy kid but becomes mean and rotten, and that I like to see. Ebert replies, he sort of made a deal with the devil, like in The Devil and Daniel Webster. He says to the car, make me look cool behind the wheel, and I'll do whatever you tell me to do. And then further in the review, they talk about their own childhood, their own first cars, and give it 2 thumbs up, and in Ebert's text review, he says, and I'm just going to quote this one, I love how he puts all of this. The entire movie depends, of course, on our willingness to believe that a car can have a mind of its own. I have believed in stranger things in the movies. Christine can drive around without a driver, play appropriate 1950s rock songs, lock people inside, and repair its own crushed fenders. The car is another inspiration from Stephen King, the horror novelist who specializes in thrillers about everyday objects. Earlier this year, we got his Cujo about a rabid St. Bernard, and any day now, I expect him to announce Amityville 4, the garage door opener. So, first off, I just want to point out, he's name-dropping Stephen King here, so between this and Carrie, King-mania was in. He didn't mention King at all during Carrie because he was just a guy. Now, it is important that this is a Stephen King story, and he is notating that the same thing that we do, that, this is a very Stephen King story. Christine is, of course, utterly ridiculous, but I enjoyed it anyway. The movies have a love affair with cars, and at some dumb elemental level, we enjoy seeing chases and crashes. In fact, under the right circumstances, there's nothing quite so exhilarating as seeing a car crushed, and one of the best scenes in Christine is one where the car forces itself into an alley that's too narrow for it. Christine was directed by John Carpenter, who made Halloween, and his method is to take the story more or less seriously. One grin and the mood would be broken. But by the end of the movie, Christine has developed such a formidable personality that we are actually taking sides during its duel with a bulldozer. This is the kind of movie where you walk out with a silly grin, get in your car, and lay rubber halfway down the Eisenhower.
I can't believe they got it.
Yeah, they got this movie. They gave it 2 thumbs up, 3 stars out of 4. Of all people, both Siskel and Ebert loved Christine.
Now, I'm going to say, I don't know how I feel about the fact that he's referring to Cujo the dog as an item. However, it is extremely funny that he managed to predict 10 different Stephen King novels before they happened.
Yeah, yep. What if your cell phone was giving you a virus? Whoa. Now it's time to get physical.
Let's get physical.
Let's get physical. Because I'm happy to report that this movie is actually very easy to get on a 4K Ultra HD and Blu-ray combo pack. Martin Liebman of Blu-ray.com says it has stunningly beautiful video, superb audio. This is actually the 3rd release of this movie in Blu-ray. This is an official Sony release, by the way. But previously, it had had a Blu-ray release from Twilight Time and again in Sony. It delivers HDR video, Dolby Atmos soundtrack, and so it also has a lot of really cool features as well. There's a teaser and theatrical trailer, which is unique to the 4K release. Those things are not on previous discs. And the Blu-ray is the one that Sony released back in 2015. It includes all supplemental content. such as an audio commentary with John Carpenter and Keith Gordon together, which that sounds awesome. Deleted scenes, and then 3 different making of featurettes, which is cool. It sounds like a pretty solid little package. Great, version of the movie. I would assume it's very similar to the version that we watched on streaming, which looked and sounded really good. But on a physical disc, you don't get the artifacting, so I'm sure that looks great. But the one thing that it does not include that one of the previous ones did is that apparently in 2013, the Twilight Time release had a special audio track that was just the score, no dialogue.
Man.
Yeah, I know. That would have been cool. So, at that same time, and this is actually something I wrote in my notes, I will say that Christine has it has a wonderful use of music and sound, but it definitely has less of a prominent score than you're used to in a John Carpenter movie.
But it has a great soundtrack.
Oh, it has a wonderful soundtrack. And yeah, absolutely. So that's just something to keep in mind, that basically the 4K version is excellent. It's not flawless if you want everything on a disc, but if you want a great way to watch a great movie with a lot of good special features, then we're very lucky. This movie could have been, lost to the sands of time, but I think that history has vindicated it as a fun time. So do you want to talk about the movie?
I sure do.
Hooray!
Christine is more than a movie. It is a car. And a girl.
A car and her boy. We love to see it. My first note, just so you all know, is pounds table, Yaoi. We'll get into that.
The intro for this being a logo over a revving car is admittedly very reserved for an intro, but it is kind of unsettling.
Well, I think part of that is just the sound design in this movie is really great, and it has to be because, a car without impact is barely a car at all, as Strong Bad would not say. But, you need to feel that roar of the rumbling engine, and I can only imagine that, on a surround set, it would really hit you right in the heart.
That was probably, perfect for, theaters, wasn't it?
It's kind of like the opening to Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, where it's just bright white screen, ominous single piano notes. Those kinds of or the Comics Code Authority at the start of Spider-Verse. I'm just thinking of single moments that just grip you when you're starting to watch and just you feel in your soul and you're like, oh, here we go.
Now, not to get depressing here. However, it does sadden me just a little bit that I feel as though these intros that are made for theater experiences are slowly gonna go away over time, just as theaters start to close down and everything's kind of moving straight to streaming.
Yeah, I don't think theaters will ever truly close down because they've been doing all right. But you're absolutely right. With so much stuff going straight to streaming, people that it's much less about kind of the experience of being a high schooler in going into Scott Pilgrim versus the World, not sure what you're going to get hit with, only to get hit with the 8-bit Universal logo and the opening. It's I think I could sit here and just list all kinds of iconic movie openings that really made me feel this way, but gotta give it to Christine. This is a big one. This is one of those ones that, I love when you're just sitting there watching a movie and it hits you with just that moment that just pulls you, and I was in.
Now, I'm going to reserve my judgment for the end of this arc, but I want to say one thing, which is that I feel like the best person to interpret King's material, in my opinion, is Mike Flanagan. There's a lot of King-isms, I think, that make you go, huh? And I think most directors kind of don't know how to balance Stephen King with making a good movie, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
Top 3.
Oh, yeah.
And we'll see here. After the intro with the revving car, we go to a car shop. We go to a car manufacturing factory as Bad to the Bone plays.
I'm going to tell you all something right here. And this is the gospel truth. Easy Rider lied to you. Bad to the Bone is a bad song. It's not a good song. It sucks. I'm sorry. I hate this song. I don't care if it was cool in Easy Rider. It's not even not cool here. But it's just like this really lazy blues song where it's a guy going, blah, 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 blah. No, you're not bad. You don't sound cool. You don't look cool looking, jamming along to this song in your crappy little Harley Davidson. It's a bad song. We need to stop using it. We have moved past the need for Bad to the Bone. No more Bad to the Bone. It was fine in Easy Rider, but it should never have left Easy Rider.
They say Christine was a car made with hate, and I think we can tell because it was made in Detroit in 1957.
That was the automotive capital of the world. The Motor City.
I will say, you're right. Song fucking sucks.
Yeah.
But it's fitting here.
Yeah.
One of the major changes that I know from the book, actually, in this version, Christine is this sentient, supernaturally evil car that just sort of exists in the world. And in the book, it's very overtly so Christine is possessed by the ghost of this old war veteran. So the person who sells the car to Arnie in the movie is really a composite of two characters. One of them is the original character, which is the war veteran who used to own the car, who's this bitter old veteran, who Arnie slowly adopts kind of the mannerisms of. And then also they combine this character with the person who sold the car's brother from the novel, who, after the person who originally owned the car dies, the brother kind of warns Dennis of what's going on. So that's the general explanation of it. Now you may ask, is Christine a trans book in this regard? No. And we'll leave it there.
Fair enough. Yeah.
However, it is gay as fuck.
Well, I mean, yes, of course. We have the Yaoi car, or the Yaoi car movie. Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about what this movie does really well. And that is, it's really funny that John Carpenter said that he doesn't know how to make Christine menacing, because that is the one thing that, as Ebert pointed out, man, this car has so much personality. It knows how to make cars pretty. There are these shots where they show people in Christine's rear view mirror, or you'd swear the car is staring someone down, or has a personality. It's genius, really.
When we eventually get to Christine killing these people, you get this feeling that this character could only have been brought to life by the same guy who did Michael Myers, because it's exactly the same level of menacing where, the person who's going to be the victim sees the car, knows exactly what's going to happen, but they run away anyways. And that is pure fucking horror to me.
Yeah. And I want to point out, this is probably one of the first kind of real connections that I've found, is that in just this really clever, subtle directing of using a lot with a little, and just a great use of close-ups, is how kind of he makes kind of Christine feel alive. And it really does remind me of Carrie and how she demonstrates her psychic powers in the movie. Well, there's a lot of really great shots here, where, they kind of have to do a lot with a little. In Carrie, they didn't have much budget, right? And so, in order to kind of show off her psychic powers, they had to do a lot of really good, kind of close-up shots of her eyes, which kind of tell a whole story in just a few seconds. And John Carpenter does that really well with Christine, where it's this car is not a real-life sentient car, but by just showing a shot of its mirror, showing people getting into it, just slow pans around the car. It manages to really do a lot with a little. And I think that's kind of the appeal, I think, of Stephen King's books and why they do adapt to movies so well is because so many of them are founded on a very simple idea that requires clever directing.
Love that. Exactly. Now, we get a fast forward in time after Christine's first murder. Done only like a day after she was born.
Well, she's just, good for her. She's just making sure she hits the ground running.
So we get to meet our two main characters, Arnie Cunningham, the stereotypical nerd, and Dennis, the jock. And let me ask, is this not Jennifer's Body for Men? Like with the roles reversed here.
Yeah. I hope you're ready for some nerd jock yaoi, because you're going to get it.
And man, Dennis is this, pretty boy who tries super hard to get his Neil Cicerega man crush laid.
God!
He's like, listen here, dude, we gotta get you some pussy.
Yeah, that's the thing. This movie is so gross about women, which I think is done to prove a point. I have some thoughts about it. While I absolutely understand the point, I do think that, I don't think that that's any kind of problem, but I do think that a lot of, the actual writing of women in the movie, undermines its own point.
I love Stephen King so much, but I'm going to tell you right now, listening to the audiobook of Christine, it's hilarious how many scenes we have of Arnie just being with Christine and Dennis just being like, I'm not jealous. And in order to make up for this, because King is worried, wait, what if this comes off like Dennis is queer? He then just adds in a line every once in a while, so then this was like when I banged this cheerleader.
God!
It's pretty fucking funny, I can't lie.
Steve, I got some bad news for you, buddy. It did not work. No.
But
I do think, honestly, with, to get philosophical on you, I do think that a lot of this is intentional, kind of the really shitty comments towards women, the sniffing of the hair.
I think this is as good of a time as any. Aaron, hit me with the meaning of triangulation.
Okay. So, triangulation, that is a tenet in queer and feminist theory, as dictated by Eve Kosofsky Sedgwick in her 1985 book, Between Men.
Woo!
English Literature and Male Homosocial Desire. Before I begin, I want to say shout outs to our friends at Third Tower Productions, Paige and Chris, for giving us a lot of this early introduction to this author, this book, and this concept of triangulation. Thank you. Remember, it's not gay if it's in a three-way. We hope you do you proud. So, to tell you a little bit about triangulation, I'll hit you with a definition first, then a little bit of background info. But through this book, the definition is generally related to the idea of the triangle, which is, for example, a love triangle, two rivals in love, a woman in the middle. And it's basically saying that the passion expressed for this triangle between these two men as they vie for this woman in the middle is, it's not that important that they're vying for the woman in the middle. The real thing is she's basically acting as a conduit for their desire for each other, And yes, I just want to point out that yes, this is, at its core, something of a misogynistic sort of way of looking at these things, just in terms of, this is a piece of queer theory. This is a piece of writing that can be misogynistic. I will say though, when in modern, queer theory, when it comes to triangulation, it is, often maybe something like an object can kind of become the conduit of basically these emotions expressed into this object or into this other form that, are really just closeted emotions between these two men.
You're just jealous of my car, Christine.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Oh, you're just jealous of my car, Christine. Oh, I gotta spend all my time with my car, Christine. Well, why aren't you spending time with me?
And let me say, if this is just too hard to comprehend, think of it a little like Betty, Veronica, and Archie. Like this, that is like the reversal of this general idea. I think it's accepted by most people. Like, it's like the Velma and Daphne thing. A lot of people really do just ship those two specifically. But also, the entire focus of their stories, like, majority of Archie's stories is, will Archie wind up with Betty or Veronica?
Mm-hmm.
And, like, that, think about it that way.
Yeah. So hopefully, we've done you proud, Eve Kosofsky Sedgwick and our friends, Chris and Paige. Because we'll have a lot to consider about this, because this entire movie is based around this sort of intense, like, desire, and, the desire kind of for the object and how it overpowers the desire for the other. It's a real interesting little thing. But yeah, if you want nerd and shock yaoi, we got you.
So we are immediately introduced to the new girl. The girl who is the object of the triangulation, who we later learned is named Lee. Being shown around the school, and we also meet the school bully with the shittiest mutton chops known to man, and also a switchblade named Buddy. Listen, Buddy.
And then all of this, I just want to say the entire scene with the bullying and with the switchblade and the fighting the dirty and the talking about, like, macho behavior and people grabbing each other's dicks. I mean, it really just makes me, speaking of queer theory, make me want to reread Queering the Pitch, which was very much about soccer players having sex in the locker room.
It's insane to me that this scene happens almost verbatim in the book. This happens, like, slightly later. After Arnie has already gotten the car, because that's actually the first scene in the novel. Now,
Stephen King was like, what the hell is setup?
Dennis fucking immediately comes in to just be like, you're not fucking touching Arnie, fucking whack. Oh, man. And then the bullies even, like, step on Arnie's glasses.
Oh, that's the worst thing, is a glasses wearer. I flinched, I cringed, I sobbed, and I cried at that scene. I could not believe this.
I had to wear a busted up pair of glasses for literally about a month while I was trying to figure out a whole bunch of times for me to go to an appointment, and times I can go to that appointment while they'll take my insurance and all that. So yeah, no, this was like one of the most secretly evil scenes.
Top 10 scariest
from
moments
a bully.
in Christine.
That said, it's hilarious to me. Have you ever seen the Zelda ad with the rap song?
Yes, the Legend of Zelda, and it's really bad. Or really rad. The creatures from Ganon are really bad. With the kid with the big glasses pushing his... Yeah, okay.
And then the other guy has, like, the varsity jacket.
Yes! I actually was wondering about that. Because, like, his glasses are taped up in the middle just like Arnie. And then you have the other guy... I was actually wondering about that. Like, do you think... Like, I mean, the nerd with the taped up glasses has always kind of been a stereotype, but... Do you think they intentionally did that, or did this invent the nerd with the middle taped up glasses, like, stereotype?
Honestly, we'd have to, like, run it back. I need, like, a film historian to really look into it. There might be, like, a 1950s example.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of, like, 1950s culture here, but this is one of the most obvious examples of it that I can find.
Right.
But that is, like, that immediately came to mind as soon as they introduced the glasses getting beaten up and taped. Oh yeah, and also, I just want to say Stephen King gets a lot of flack for making his main characters writers. And then also, but Also, like a lot of his early ones especially have a lot of, okay, so here's this really cool teacher. And these teenagers are extremely shitty. Good thing this really cool teacher is here to step in. It's like, man, so
Steve.
Some student really pissed off Stephen King this badly.
Can you imagine going to school and like something weird happens to you, you shut your hand in a locker back then, and you see this new book by Mr. King, your teacher or janitor, and it's like the story of the kid whose hand was cut off in a locker and came to life and killed people. Like, come on.
It really just came to me. I can't explain this one.
I can't explain it. I was just thinking about, like, wouldn't it be crazy if someone's hand came to life?
I was looking at my own hand.
Idle hands.
So let me just say also, Buddy is like somehow more of a psycho than any of the fucking bullies in Carrie.
Yeah, I mean the bullies in Carrie were too realistic. Then you have Buddy, who's just like, Mr. I'm gonna take a shit on your car.
He stabs Arnie's lunch. He literally barks at people. He threatens to kill students in front of the teachers. And then, he takes a shit on cars and also grabs his gang to just stab the fuck out of them?
Yeah?
What the fuck is this guy's deal?
What is this guy's deal? Listen, for all you wrestling fans out there who may be complaining that the House of Black, the spooky horror stable, has a guy called Buddy in it. Just watch this movie. You will never question a Buddy again.
Buddy is the scariest man in all of Stephen King.
Move over, Jack Torrance. You got some competition.
Anyways, moving on. We get to the first scene in the novel. This comes after we are already introduced to the main cast at this point. Arnie tells Dennis to go back because he found Christine, which is junked to hell car. And the scrawniest old man ever, a man by the name of George LeBay, brother of the original owner, shows up wearing a metal brace vest. Pacing for this movie is just incredibly rapid fire, which, I love this, and it's also fun to go from the 70s, which I think is a little more relaxed, to 80s, which is, I think is, again, I told you, is like a lot more tighter pace.
Absolutely, and that's something really interesting to look at, just the difference between, like, how films were paced, how films were made in comparison, with the 70s and 80s, the 80s, it was just like, okay, go, 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 which, I think works for this story as well.
And you compare that to, like, even King's own book, and by this point, we already know what Dennis's sandwich order is. Like, it's nice to see the story realized in a way that gets a lot of the major points of the film, but also can create new ones and tells the story in a lot more of a concise manner.
Mm-hmm.
Now, after they go ahead and buy the car, we get to meet the parents, and in the book, they are these very liberal parents who just want the best for their son. But also, like, it's said that they are assholes, and they're definitely assholes here.
Uh-huh.
But also, I want to say, the one thing that I always thought was interesting here, that feels a little more obvious here versus in the book, the parents don't really like Dennis.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it?
Now, they do kind of say, like, oh, Dennis didn't try hard enough to stop you from buying the car, but I feel like even from the first scene with the parents, like, they are very aggressive towards him, and you can take that as just,
it's because they're queering his son.
Well, no, like, I think that literally, like, if you accept this as, like, a queer story,
yeah.
Like, this is kind of a worry of, oh no, this one handsome-looking boy is over here with our son, and he might be a homosexual.
Yeah. I really do love, I want to go back a little bit, talking about triangulation and the scenes where they are very misogynistic and shitty to women in some of their conversations, which I think is actually kind of its own critique. But it is really interesting just how emphatic Dennis is to getting Arnie laid. Like, you care about this man's sex life a lot, huh, buddy? Is there something you're not telling us? But yeah, that's kind of funny. So at this point,
if a girl won't lay Arnie, I'll have to do it myself.
You know, yeah, I'm just gonna have to do it myself. Hey, that's how it happened with me. No, it's a joke. So at this point, like, Arnie's bought Christine, and Dennis does not want him to buy Christine, and is constantly telling him, don't buy that car. Don't get out. This is weird. I don't want that car to come between us. That's what he's really saying. Can I just point out, this is probably a funny coincidence. The guy he buys it from is called George LeBay. And I know this is literally just me, but I hear the word LeBay and I think of LaBelle from Ready or Not, which makes me think of Belial, which makes me think of Anton LaVey. Like, I don't know if that's intentional.
It might have been, actually, because George LeBay in the book is the brother of the person who possesses Christine, which is named Roland LeBay. And considering the fact he's kind of the major villain of the story, I do think that there is like a demonic sort of thing with him.
Yeah, so the Anton LaVey or Belial, like, all these things are probably at least somewhat intentional to kind of, influence your feelings about this stuff.
If not, like, meant to be a theme, I do think it might have been an accidental thing.
Which is fun.
So they go ahead and move the car to a DIY garage, and I just have to say, I accepted this as a part of the story. But I never knew that something like this really existed. I don't know, like, Googling DIY garages, they're actually a lot more commonplace than I was led to believe. I just have never seen any of these kind of locations before.
So it's just kind of like, yeah, I believe there's one near my work, but that I thought was kind of specific to, like, where I work. So you're saying that, like, there are just these garages where you just park your car and they give you all the tools to do the car work yourself?
Yeah, no.
Do you just pay for parking?
Well, I think they basically just allow you to park in one of their spaces and then fix up the car as it is. And I just have to say, this feels like a detail that would only have been put in here by a guy who either made this up and got lucky or regularly used a DIY garage. And I'm just going to be honest, I think it's the latter.
Yeah. You got to put it in the oil. This type of car really chews through oil. So take it to the DIY car shop and get some oil to put oil in your car.
The editor is just looking at, Stephen, look, you're going to have to, like, cut this entire chapter. That's just about how many, the right type of oil for this car. It's not necessary to the plot.
You need multiple quarts of Pennzoil to put in your car. And this is how you tighten a lug nut. Steve, we don't need a chapter on lug nuts.
Arnie would know this information, but the reader doesn't need to know it. At the DIY shop, Dennis talks to this older gentleman who owns the place, played by the late Robert Prosky, and he repeats a line by the parents, which is that Dennis should have tried harder to stop Arnie from buying the car. And also that the guy who this guy just happened to have known the previous owner of the car who killed himself in it.
Yeah.
This was not in the book.
Oh.
Now I will say the owner was in the book, and for whatever reason, the owner of this garage was just this massive fucking mobster who's like a massive deal in the book. Yes.
She's like a Tony Soprano?
Yes, literally. Like,
hey, ma, you gotta take the car to the Drupini. That's what we call a car wash in Italy.
You know, I will say, like, I wrote down before I'd even listened to this that the dude talks like a Dick Tracy villain mixed with Peter Griffin. And, like, listening to, and once I finally, like, understand, oh, he's a mobster, it's like, everything makes sense because he's just very, yeah, see?
Robert Prosky's hilarious in this movie. I do want to bring also one thing. I believe this was a line said by Arnie, going back to the objectification of women and also kind of how it applies to Christine. He has this line which makes my skin crawl, and I hate it. And I hate to repeat it. But he says, "New car smell. That's the best smell. The only better smell is pussy."
Again, literally in the book, literally in chapter fucking 1, but that's like said by Robert, that's said by Roland.
Oh!
That's said by Roland LeBay, literally
You
like
are
the
right.
shitty guy.
Yeah, you are right. You're right. Okay, yes, that was actually a LeBay line. Okay. Still, it's a disgusting, disgusting line.
Yeah, no, I think it's, even in the book, it's made to be like this sign that this guy is a real piece of work.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's, again, I think that a lot of this is intentional because it's an interesting thing. You mentioned American Graffiti, and I love American Graffiti. I think American Graffiti is incredible. But I also feel that I get a different read on American Graffiti than most people. I think most people, when they watch American Graffiti, or at least when they watched it at the time, just felt very nostalgic towards that era. Whereas I find American Graffiti to be a very sad movie. I mean, a beautiful movie, but a very sad one. And I think this movie kind of has a lot of that in it, of sort of a regret-tinged look back. And I think that's something interesting that will probably come up again as we discuss this movie. But yeah, there's a lot of really questionable things in this movie, which are very fascinating to explore. And Robert Prosky is indeed hilarious.
So after this, well, I think we get like probably one of the sweeter scenes in the entirety of the movie. So, it's
so intense. I love this scene.
To me, this is the moment where, like, if you weren't already thinking that these two would be like the couple of the movie, like this is the scene that would like possibly change. This is the scene that'll change your mind.
I forgot this scene happened, and during our rewatch, I was hooting and hollering. So go on.
Dennis drops off Arnie, and Arnie questions Dennis why he looks after him and Christine. Yeah. To which Dennis avoids the answer, and we get this exchange where Dennis asks Arnie what he sees in the car, and Arnie says, for the first time, I found something that's uglier than me. And Dennis tells Arnie earnestly that, he's not ugly. Queer, maybe. And then both of them laugh, and Arnie says, "Fuck you," with a huge smile.
It is so intense. He says it. He just says it. Like, you're, oh my God, you're queer maybe, but not ugly. He says that out loud. Out loud. Why'd they do that?
And then, Arnie just basically tells Dennis that, he doesn't deserve the heat. Just go ahead, drop me off. I got this. Mm-hmm. It's such a wonderful kind of moment that I think really exemplifies their wonderful friendship.
They seem to be very good friends.
So,
can I talk a little bit about how much I love how the radio is used in this movie?
Oh, absolutely.
I think it's awesome. I've always loved radio stuff, but like Christine constantly playing love songs and playing like ironic oldies, as she does what she does is so great. And I think that, it makes her a really fun sort of quirk. It's funny that Bumblebee from Transformers and Michael Bay Transformers stole that.
It was a good thing to steal.
Yeah, it's a good thing to steal. And then you have the really twisted version with Chrome Skull in the Laid to Rest movies, and his kit bashing of victims' last words. That's a fun one.
The only other one I can think of that's like vaguely similar to this is in the movie Trick or Treat. The 80s Trick or Treat, I should say, not the 2001, which is a horror movie about a rock star who kills himself. And
this movie was recently released physically and crashed the website it was from 3 days in a row. So,
and in order for this rock star to communicate with this one person from beyond the dead, he basically possesses the record player, and then when the protagonist plays the record in reverse, it actually plays this. It actually speaks to him with these awesome reverse messages.
Oh, I love stuff I just really love stuff like hi-fi radio music, just evil messages in all this. I just love stuff like this.
And I just have to say, bringing up Trick or Treat and also Christine, it actually reminds me, one thing I've been trying to document is all these movies that are kind of these horror versions of the biker movie, which I consider Christine to be like that. I consider The Lost Boys to be like this.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea is that it's about a good person who falls in with this wrong crowd, or it's about a good person welcoming some evil force into their life that permanently changes them. And we see so many different films tackle this. Brain Scan, Brain Damage, Hereditary, even Near Dark. And I think that what's cool about Christine is I think it's one of the more obvious examples of this evil corrupting force, which is kind of the supernatural version of this. Sorry, am I going off too much?
Well, no, it's just like they said. It's just like Ebert said with the devil and Daniel Webster. It's. This is a classic story of shaking hands with a force that is going to take more and more of itself, take more and more away from you, the deeper you go. It's been a thing since the early days of the movie, and it's a really cool kind of thing that you're seeing,
I just adore those stories. Faust.
Oh yeah. Which we probably should watch The Devil and Daniel Webster at some point.
The Portrait of Dorian Gray.
Mm-hmm.
Phantom of the Paradise.
Yeah,
we need to get back to that one, maybe.
We've
mentioned
it twice now. So.
In the same arc.
Yeah. Okay, I want to move on a little bit and talk.
Absolutely.
I just want to say that it's funny how Dennis is the sweet one in this story, and I kept thinking about how last episode you mentioned that Stephen King was kind of popular in school, that he wasn't the bullied kid. So, it's do you think he sees himself as Dennis deep down?
Listen, the nerds deserve to be so far the nerds have kind of deserved to be sort of bullied or have bad things happen to them, and then the
cool popular kids are doing just fine.
There's a good example of one of the cool kids too.
I was the cool kid, the popular one who didn't bully, even though my friends bullied.
You can't say Steven isn't empathetic. Anyways.
So I want to talk a little bit about how he goes back to LeBay, right? And LeBay says, "The only thing my brother ever loved was that car. No shitter ever got between him and that car. All he ever cared about was that car." And literally... This just is again, it's text talking about, who's the shitter in this situation? It's Dennis. Dennis is the shitter getting between Arnie and Christine.
Literally, again, I hate to just constantly say the book actually goes more into it, but literally The interesting thing is Roland LeBay's line in the book for everybody like this is 100% the shitters.
Oh my god!
Which is this like nondescript kind of like enemy that he always has.
So they do use the word shitters as much as they do in this movie.
Yes.
Because they're constantly calling people shitters in this movie. And then they have a literal shitter with one of the bullies.
Well, we know exactly why.
That's called foreshadowing, folks.
Foreshadowing to the shit.
Foreshadowing.
Foreshadowing. So before Lee hooks up with Arnie, we do get a scene that was written for the movie where Dennis goes to hit on Lee. But one thing that also introduced in this movie I think is hilarious, probably one of the I want to give like an award to the best side character to some of these movies.
Yeah.
The blonde girl who has goo eyes for Dennis constantly, but doesn't really get like any lines is fucking hilarious.
Oh, she doesn't get any lines. She doesn't really do anything. She's just in this scene. She's our ones. Like in St. Elmo's Fire, you had the roommate. This is our one scene wonder of the arc, I think.
She gets like a brief line talking to Dennis when they introduce Lee, but like the best scene with her is right when they go over to when Dennis goes over to sit at Lee's table, before it, like, he passed this girl, and she's just like, oh my god, Dennis is gonna sit next to me, and then he just keeps walking, and her heart breaks before her heart breaks before we go to the next scene. It's fucking hysterical.
God, yeah.
We respect her. She deserves her own movie. As Arnie is fixing the car, we do see that he is changing too. He literally stops wearing his glasses.
Yeah.
And so it starts to look more like, your stereotypical delinquent. And I just have to say, I don't know if they explain if his eyesight just gets better if he takes it off. It's like an evil version of the Spider-Man 2000 moment.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's like... they smashed your glasses, man. You probably can't see anything. Bad depth perception.
So Dennis is getting suspicious after Arnie stops hanging out with him. His parents say that, they can't get to see Arnie anymore. So just for curiosity's sake, Dennis goes ahead and checks on Christine and breaks in. And credit to Carpenter, being the music lover that he is. He has Christine literally like speak through the songs too.
Oh, it's so cool.
And Stephen King did not write like any kind of like set list for this movie. So this was probably one of the best creative choices I think that Carpenter had done.
Yeah, that's super cool. Like I say, I really think that in anyone else's hands this movie wouldn't have worked. For all those reasons. So we find out that Lee's date that she had at the football game was indeed Arnie, because as Dennis is playing in the big football game, he looks over and sees Lee and Arnie making out on the sidelines and immediately gets distracted. Buddy, you're not fooling anyone. You're not distracted by Lee. You're distracted by Arnie. And, immediately he gets tackled by 1,000 different kids and fractures his patella or whatever it is. Hurts his leg somehow, basically.
I love the zoom in on Christine's, quote unquote face.
Yes,
like
the grill.
It almost implies like she is responsible for this, which...
Yeah, or she's jealous. It's super good.
God.
Yeah, like you said, the personification of Christine in this movie is awesome. Like, how'd they do that?
And I didn't finish the Christine novel yet, but I do want to say, I know one more thing about the novel, which I think is just extremely strange to me.
Yeah?
The book is separated into 3 sections. The first section is completely first person and narrated by Dennis. Mm-hmm. And the third section is completely narrated by Dennis. And I feel like you can tell that in the story just a little bit, because he feels like he is kind of the main characters of these sections. Now, the middle of the book, the middle section here, is completely third person.
Yeah.
And they don't really explain it. It was just kind of like a complete shift in tone you're just kind of supposed to accept. It feels like...
I thought you were going to say it's from Christine's perspective.
Now, Stephen had never really done a real first-person kind of book before this. Like, not to the same degree. So, this was kind of his take on let me do one from a character's perspective. But it feels like he kind of just ran out of ideas. He was like, man, I really want to just like finish this book, but do it in like my normal style. So he just had Dennis get taken out and then just like write about and then he just wrote about the book as he wanted to until he was ready to bring Dennis back. Okay, we're finishing it again. First person style's back, baby. It's still my first person book.
That's so funny. See, it's that easy, you know? Whenever there's a thing that, you know, you don't want to talk about, just have it happen off screen and have the characters reminisce about it. There's no way this can go wrong.
I've slowly begun to realize that Garth Marenghi and Alan Wake are a lot better parodies than I'd ever given them credit for. Sorry, we do love you, Stephen King. I'm just saying.
I mean, yeah. Sutter Kane in the Mouth of Madness. That's hilarious. That's hilarious. So I want to talk again. We mentioned that they kept using the word shitter in this movie. Like, they just keep using the word shitter. Is that a thing that they said back then? Or do you think it's just because of the stuff in the book?
I think it is because of the book, and also it is made out to be kind of a weird thing in the book, too. Like, it's kind of like his word for...
anyone he disagrees with.
Yes, LeBay's kind of like enemy is always going to be the shitters.
Right.
Which can be like anyone or anything. This is a reference that only you will get, but it's much like Daniel the Fuck Bryan.
Yeah. I understand the joke. No, you're absolutely right. I want to talk about some incredibly good Arnie quotes that we have around this point.
Go for it. Greaser Arnie is fucking great. He's here in his fucking like cardigan and blue dress shirt.
There's two things. So Arnie has a fight with his parents, you know. He's disobeying his parents who didn't want him to have the car anyway. And he says, they just don't want me to grow up because then they'd have to face getting old.
Oh!
Yeah, got him. And he also says, has it ever occurred to you that part of being a parent is trying to kill your kids?
Man!
What a line, right? It's funny because, I think, like, from Arnie's perspective, or I guess, it's an interesting thing to think about, because Arnie is very clearly kind of becoming a worse person right now.
Yes.
And his parents very clearly don't want him to become a worse person. But, I do have to think that there's a lot about teenage rebellion in this story that you can kind of pick apart here of all kinds. Like, parents that don't accept you, parents that don't support you, or at least the perception as a teenager that you know everything and your parents aren't supporting you.
I think there's some very obvious parallels to real life that both the book and the movie kind of play on. It's that, and also the idea of meeting this one relationship,
right?
Like, for example, a romantic relationship that changes you,
right?
And that is not Lee. That is Christine.
Christine, yes, absolutely. And meeting Christine makes him a worse person, which is fun. There's a lot. There's also like the nerds being radicalized, which is unfortunately something we're seeing far too much of. But I think that was already also a point, was sort of the disenfranchised youth and what I think that's always been a thing in horror, though. You look at Black Roses and about how heavy metal was going to corrupt the youth. I think the corruption of the innocent, to put it in comic book terms, has always been a concern. Some of it, definitely warranted. Some of it a little hysterical. It really depends.
It was a big conservative
At the same time, we're looking at this sort of nerd becoming more radicalized. But that's its own thing. Like, that's a real thing that's actually happening. So Who knows? But, yeah. Date time with Arnie and Lee at the drive-in.
A drive-in in the rain.
Yeah, in the rain. That's weird, because whenever we go to our drive-in, it always shuts down, right? Like, whenever there's bad weather. I mean, we've only ever managed to go there once, because it doesn't play during winter.
I mean, to be fair, what if we don't know when the rain started. It's very possible they might have just started this movie and then, like, double feature. They're just like, oh, we're not fucking stopping this one.
Yeah. But we don't want to refund people. By the way, the movie that they're watching at the drive-in, I looked this one up too, because this is another movie where the characters are watching a movie. And it is 1978's Thank God It's Friday.
I feel like that's the only reason that they keep telling us the date in this movie. It's so weird. Like, I can kind of understand that why they switch between the 1950s and the 1970s later on, and like they sort of talk about in the book. Okay, we're around Halloween time sometimes, but like we constantly get scenes like Dennis leaves the house at October 1st. It's like, okay.
Yeah. So, I want to talk a little here about Lee. Because at this movie, like, so much has kind of happened so fast in this movie. Because basically, immediately we see that Lee and Arnie are dating. And then immediately they cut to this scene where they have a fight. And I guess an unfortunate part of this movie is that Lee at no point is given much characterization. It's really unfortunate that even despite Christine being the central kind of conflict between Arnie and Dennis, even with that, like, Lee as a character is just woefully underdeveloped.
She feels like she should be a bigger person from the 80s. She did eventually become like this very well-known character on Baywatch, from what I could tell, but like, she has this 80s final girl energy, like, down entirely, but she isn't really given anything.
Exactly. She's a great actress. I really like her in the movie, you know, in terms of her acting, but she is not given a thing.
Yeah, you get some, like, great scenes around this time here, too.
Yeah, where, they're fighting over Christine.
God, I just love the scene where, like, Arnie is, like, all over Lee, and then we just keep getting zooms in on Christine, and, like, even though Christine is, like, a car, you can feel the car's disappointment.
This is a malicious car. Yeah, she just has a chaos aura and wants to kill Lee. But yeah, they have this really interesting fight, and the fight is about Christine, and it's about, like, you know, you pay more attention to this car than me, which, you know, again, is kind of the same central conflict with Dennis. And there's a really great line that Lee delivers where she says, "This car's a girl," which is basically like, you know, "Oh, no, you know, you're the only girl for me. Well, this car's named Christine," you know.
Lee starts fucking, like, slapping Christine's seat just to prove that Arnie likes the car more than her.
Yeah.
Arnie's just like, stop, that's the interior.
Mm-hmm. And it works really well. There's a lot about how Arnie is basically just trying to use this cool persona and this car to basically mask his inadequacies. And he's making up for his shortcomings by taking it out on others.
Honestly, extremely good.
Yeah, it's very cool stuff. But unfortunately, with everything happening in this movie, I really think Lee is completely underbaked and underused. And,
but, you know, I will say, she gets probably one of the best horror sequences up to this point, and again until we get to, like, the full-on slasher moments, which is her.
She's left alone in the car.
Yeah, she's left alone in the car. She eats some of her food.
Yeah,
I think it was what was it?
Popcorn.
So she's eating food, and she starts to choke. While Arnie is outside of the car, Christine locks Arnie out as Arnie is just, like, trying to get in, and Christine just plays Richard Valens' "You're Mine and We Belong Together." Holy shit.
Yeah,
right as the car is just going, like, and glowing in alien light.
It's so great. Yeah, the way that the dashboard lights up is beautiful. Like I said, this car is a chaos aura that causes bad things to happen. But yeah, the inside glowing looks amazing. Like, visually, This movie has so many stunning and interesting moments with the car.
Crazy that Carpenter didn't feel like he could make this creepy.
Exactly.
Like that scene is like perfect fucking horror, frankly.
And I want to talk about the score. I mentioned earlier I didn't feel that, this had as much of a score as I'm used to for Carpenter, or even as much as I'm used to for a Stephen King adaptation. But the score that is there is just Carpenter synth delicious. Like, it is some good stuff.
Man.
And everyone Arnie hates is a shitter.
I just want to say, by this point, you said the words Yandere Car out loud.
Yes.
And I just have to say, if you're keeping track at home, our biggest yanderes on the podcast so far are Christine and the Riddler.
Good company to be in.
We need this. We need the Hall of Fame by episode 100.
The Yandere Hall of Fame. Christine, the Riddler. Who knows what could come next?
By this point, the car is basically fixed up, but Arnie still keeps it at the DIY garage. So the bullies from earlier, led by Buddy, come back here. With fucking hammers and sledgehammers. I completely forgot about that until I just checked my notes here. But like they get fucking like, it's not even so much they bring knives, they bring fucking hammers to this fucking thing.
They go to smash the crap out of this thing, man. And, the day after, like after you see the totaled car, Arnie is like ranting about the car being destroyed to his parents. And mentions that someone took a shit on the dashboard, which again, Arnie has been calling anyone who stands against him shitters. And so, it becomes very literal. At this point, you rewound the movie to see if you could see the shit on the dashboard, and you cannot see the shit on the dashboard. So take Arnie's word for it that somebody shit on the dashboard.
And what's great about this is it really shows you how deep Arnie is in at this point.
Yeah, what it reminds me of, like, this car has bad vibes.
Yes.
And what it reminds me of is, like, you watching when, I think we've all had this moment where we have a friend who has a friend, and that friend just screams bad news, or we just do not click with this friend. There's just something messed up about this. And no matter how much you try and bring it up, it becomes kind of us versus them, And it's like, this friend, your friend cannot see that their friend is bad news, but you're watching from afar just going like, oh my God, oh no, oh God, oh no, but you can't stop it, And, like, I think we've all had a moment like that, in our lives. And that's kind of the feeling I get from this movie.
It reminds me actually of, one of my favorite horror movies, The Fly, where I feel like, again, that's another kind of love story. And also, it tackles a real horror, which is, seeing somebody that you love turn into something that they're not.
Yeah.
Just getting transformed, to the point that, they're a Theseus ship of a person. They're like by the end, they are just a fucking husk of themselves, and it is just so sad and so genuinely scary.
Yeah, and The Fly is more of I would say that The Fly is more about a degenerative disease.
Yes, it's a tragedy.
This movie is more of kind of a ideological disease, kind of someone slipping into dangerous kind of habits and thoughts and groups.
And we do see him lash out immediately afterwards. He gets angry at Lee.
Yes, calls her a shitter.
Everybody who gets in his way now is a shitter.
Yeah.
And we get to... So you were talking about Carpenter's score. We get the best fucking track here.
Oh, and the coolest scene in the movie, frankly.
So once Artie kind of becomes the quote-unquote protagonist or the viewpoint character here, we get the scene as Arnie steps out of the now trashed Christine and looks on at it. And we see as as Christine plays its music, and it fucking repairs itself.
It is the coolest thing. It is so cool. Apparently, a bit of movie magic here. How they did this was it's just reversed footage. But oh my god, the angles, the shots make it look so good. And the music and Arnie going, "Show me."
There's a wonderful panning shot with it too. Like this to me
so
is I
otherworldly.
think the iconic scene with Christine for me.
It's otherworldly, it's dreamy, you know? It's beautiful. I love this scene.
Say what you will about Carpenter's take, he did this justice.
Absolutely. And I want to say this about Arnie in this scene. He's a little beat up. He kind of has, you know, the no glasses, the dark hair. He kind of reminds me of Ash in Evil Dead 2 in the groovy scene. There's just something about the way his face is framed that just makes me think of that. That's just a side note.
But, you know, I think it's safe to say after this scene where he actually sees Christine being supernatural, he is all in.
Oh, yeah.
He is no longer... if there's any question of whether or not he's being manipulated, it is no longer a thing. And this is where we start to see the slasher sequences.
It's awesome. It's awesome. Christine is... What's cool about Christine is that she's an impossible killer.
An impossible killer, and also she is the slasher villain who can kill people just by fucking charging at them.
Yeah, the fact that she like really does just slam herself into this alleyway that she has no business fitting in is so cool. Like just squeezing through that stuff.
The
like
way
metal scraping off of her.
She's willing to bang herself up just to get rid of a target, and it is insane to me how
To
they
help
literally
her beloved Arnie.
They literally have the fucking Michael Myers creep with the car.
Yeah,
I'm just saying.
like on the highway where there's a scene where one of the bullies is running down the highway and you just see Christine behind him just pursuing him. It's so cool.
Just walks behind one of the pillars, drives behind one of the pillars, I should say.
Yep.
And then just slowly moves as the bully is just picking up pace and trying to run. Fucking incredible.
Oh, it's so good. It is such a good slasher scene.
We even end on the bully pulling out a fucking switchblade to threaten Christine. I think because he thinks that it's going to be like the guy in the car, or it's just like, you know, you're not going to drive in this alleyway. And Christine's just like, watch me.
Yeah, and just smushes her way through the alleyway. It's so cool.
But, you know, they actually don't even show his death proper.
Yeah, that's the one thing I remember, like, that this movie did somewhat lack in is that, you know, I do wish that some of the deaths were more explicit in the slasher sequences.
No, I agree.
Mm-hmm. I feel that they're a little too fast, you know?
And we get Arnie. So this is about the point in the novel where Arnie is full villain again, where he's talking to Dennis about the bully's death. He's being about as ominous as possible. And then he gets questioned by Detective Rudolph Junkins.
Why'd you name him that, buddy?
Did he just pick Junkins because of junk? Like the junkyard, Christine?
That's just Junkins, man. It's Rudolph Junkins.
Played by Harry Dean Stanton, by the way.
Shout-outs to the Straight Story again. Second Straight Story reference in a row. Shout-outs to Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. Shout-outs to Twin Peaks The Return. Harry Dean Stanton, we love you, buddy.
And I know him best as Brain from Escape from New York, which I imagine that's how John Carpenter knew him, too.
Yeah, exactly, man. All these connections. Good old Harry Dean Stanton, we love you and all those things.
He was also Brett from Alien, if
Very
anybody
good.
knows that.
Yeah.
What's great here is by this point, Arnie has done the full transformation. So he's talking to the detective a lot like Buddy would talk to him and the teacher earlier.
At one point, Detective Junkins says, you know, your little girlfriend taught told me about this or something like about how they totaled Christine. And his response is, she's not my girlfriend. Like at this point, Christine has supplanted both of his major relationships. Like, oof.
So, like after he gets the detective off his ass, it's time for him to go after the next person, which, this is how Buddy dies.
Yes.
And let me just say, the funniest moment with Christine as a killer is here because, in order to piss people off, she actually turns her brights on.
Yes, it's so funny. Like, this is the part where they really do give Christine this vindictive personality and manage to successfully, like, she turns her brights on, and just this absolutely hilarious part, where, she just smashes into Buddy's car.
T-bones the fuck out of it!
Out of nowhere. And it's hilarious because it's just so shocking.
Then she and it ends up fucking blowing the fuck up, setting herself on fire.
Jason, eat your heart out. Matt Cordell, you ain't shit. Christine on fire, peeling out of the burning garage.
Christine chases down Buddy while on fire and runs him over.
And leaves him a burning corpse. It's disgusting. I love it.
I look at that sequence and I wonder how the hell they're going to remake Christine and, like, make a single moment that lives up to, like, this. Especially, like, nowadays when everything is a lot more, CG effects. Like, it's hard.
They can't do it. I'm gonna be real with you, Chief.
I will say, if they were going to...
What they should do is use that soft car physics program for this, I think.
Now, if I was to remake Christine, the only pointers, I have a few pointers I could give, probably. Maybe lean into like a 50s or 60s sci-fi aesthetic. Kind of that, like, this was kind of the time, like, and by now it's sort of like a retro idea, where, the sci-fi horror of the 1950s was all about technology gone wrong. This is literally a technology gone wrong movie. But, I don't feel like we were as removed from that time frame that we could really acknowledge that.
Right.
I do think that there are aspects of this story that would be perfect for nowadays. Really like a high schooler being recruited by an older Republican man into joining the alt-right.
Right.
Although I do think that, that's also like a reason Hollywood would probably be afraid to adapt this properly.
Oh, they're cowards.
And then, besides like that note, I also want to say, make this more overtly gay. I believe Brian Fuller has the rights to this movie.
Yeah, let's fucking go.
Yeah, give more distinction to Lee and Dennis. Have them both just genuinely love Arnie.
Just more characterization going on with Lee. Give her more to do.
And I'm going to be honest, you can probably leave the mobster stuff still on the table. It's still like a really weird detail that the book just focuses on way too much. I'm sorry.
And speaking of, we get the funniest part where Darnell, again, incredible character throughout. I don't know what the heck this guy was on. It's like this guy got cast in this movie and decided to just play the most ridiculous, like, screwed up his face, put on the Rhode Island voice. I mean, I just think that's who he was. But this guy was from a different movie, because this is where things get super weird, where he grabs a shotgun to try and shoot Christine with a gun.
See, if he was a real mobster, he'd grab a Tommy gun.
Yeah, exactly. It's just so weird and hilarious at this point. He has a sign in his office that says, "In God we trust, everyone else pay cash."
And, maybe he thought that it was Arnie. We do actually see, though, he does check the car, and there is nothing in the car. So, like, that's like our confirmation here. Like, it is not actually Artie running these people down, and we just can't see him. No, it is fucking Christine.
It is just
at least
Christine.
here.
And then we get this super nasty scene. Oh, it's horrible. It's a great scene where, like, Darnell gets into Christine, and she starts playing Boney Maroney and just crushes him flat with the how the seat reclines.
God.
It's
just choking him against the steering wheel.
Nasty stuff. Nasty stuff.
So once we're past these murder sequences, we get back to Dennis.
Mm-hmm. Dennis is playing, I think he's playing Risk with his sister. And the only time I've ever played Risk was when I played Metal Gear Solid Risk, which is a hilarious thing to exist because it should not exist, but it was a hilarious thing to exist. I played at a convention with my friend Laser, and he kicked our asses. Like me and the people he was playing it with. Like, he just completely dominated the entire game. And that's the only time I've ever played Risk. Have you ever played Risk?
No.
Yeah. So, but it did make me want to play more board games in real life. I don't play enough board games, I think. I
do love the idea of a Metal Gear Solid Risk.
Oh, it's horrible.
They should do more like extremely ironic board games, I think.
Ironic board, yes, exactly. We need,
Guess Who 999 edition.
Yeah. Okay. We're moving on.
Dennis is questioned about Arnie, and the words that come out of his mouth are, "Arnie would never."
And is this the part where Arnie sexily picks up Dennis in the car and calls him a good boy when he apologizes to Christine?
God.
Like, what are you guys on?
That Lee and Dennis at this point do become a force that comes together just out of concern for Christine here. And this is where Arnie picks him up and they drive on the empty highway as Arnie is literally drinking and driving.
Yeah, he's drinking and driving, trying to bring Dennis over. He's trying to entice him. He's trying to use the same, like, just sort of nasty romance to get him over. And it's like, oh.
The power dynamic that was there at the movie is here now. And it has become so fucking sad.
Yeah.
Like, this is like the worst end.
Oh, it's the worst, dude.
Fucking Dennis is reduced to tears here. Jesus Christ. I'm sorry.
There's a part where Arnie says, "Love eats everything. That's what we have." And you think he's talking about, like, Dennis or Lee, but it's about Christine.
And some people think that this movie is not queer-coded.
Come on!
I'm just gonna be honest, man. Replace Dennis with a girl.
Yeah.
Replace Dennis with a girl in your head and tell me that it does not change the fucking scenario for you.
Exactly. And then Arnie pulls into the wrong lane on the highway, and again he says the line that earlier LeBay says, which is, new car smell, except maybe for pussy. God. It really is really cool. Like, this whole thing, but like, I really do love kind of the queer codedness and the emotion that this movie engenders. Even if it's not a perfect movie on a lot of different levels, even if the story is ridiculous, it is so assured and so intense that you can't help but love it. And this is exactly, like, absolutely as, Siskel and Ebert saw this in their movie, and I love that.
And this is why we'll be doing movies like this and The Lost Boys until the end of time.
Yeah.
Because I do think that moments like this just really fucking get us.
Yes, exactly.
I really enjoyed the finale of Darnell's in the dark.
Oh, yes. This is awesome because we have Christine versus the bulldozer.
Christine, the car girl boss, shows up.
And and at this time you really do have Dennis and Lee in the bulldozer, Christine on her own.
Christine goes to attack them, and in the process, Arnie, who is in the driver's seat at this point, flies through the fucking windshield and ends up getting stabbed. Yes,
and this is a very anticlimactic way.
A little unceremonious, yeah.
Yeah. Here's the thing. It's unceremonious, but I do think that thematically it makes sense.
Yes.
Arnie being impaled like this is basically, you go down this rabbit hole with Christine. she'll always kill you in the end, you know?
And I think that really what makes it is not the death itself, but the reactions afterwards.
Absolutely.
You
because
say
the death itself doesn't really have the impact that I think it should. But, you know, that's just kind of how it is.
Dennis and Lee are completely heartbroken. Christine plays like sad love music as sort of like a goodbye to him. It is a moment that really shows that for all that they are still fighting for the same man, basically.
Yes, exactly. Now I want to talk a little bit, by the way, of just that John didn't think that he made the car scary, because this reminds me of Stuntman Mike from Death Proof.
God. Yeah.
Which, you know, Stuntman Mike and Death Proof is a difficult movie to talk about because half of it is incredible with Stuntman Mike, and then half of it becomes a different movie altogether that I just don't think is very good. But, you know, Stuntman Mike in Death Proof is kind of that same thing, is that he's a slasher villain whose weapon is the car. It's is one half of the Grindhouse double feature with Robert Rodriguez and Quentin Tarantino. And his scene where he's just like chasing these girls down the road with the headlights like blaring and stuff, it's good stuff. And that's kind of the thing with Christine, is that like with her headlights on, the glow, staring down the camera, like it's creepy. It is creepy stuff. You know, and it's a lot of fun too. Like it's just a good, cool little villain. I think cars are kind of underrated as slasher villain weapons, personally.
Disney has made them too cuddly.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Cars movies. No more. Cars are instruments of death and destruction, and everyone hates them. Christine should never this should never happen. But I'm amusing myself with the idea of Christine being a Cybertruck. She'd be extremely easily defeated. They just have to put her in a car wash.
Brilliant. God.
But I want to talk a little bit about the bulldozer versus Christine fight.
Oh, yeah. The car rolling over to one as Dennis rolls it over with a bulldozer just fucking rules.
It's so cool because it's just this war of attrition between these, like, industrial things fighting.
And the best part about
just like Tetsuo the Iron Man.
And the best part about it is Christine constantly repairing itself as it's run over.
Yes. And then Lee just, like, looks on as this happens. Again, she really doesn't get a lot to do except, like, react, which is a shame.
I hate to say that it feels like Steven sort of wrote himself into a corner with how he kills Christine. Because it does feel like they have to just, like, say, okay, Christine just stayed broken and did not get a chance to repair herself until we were able to, like, junk her.
And I have it written down that she gets pancaked like Sid Vicious's car. It's a shame I already used the 22 clip during the number 23 episode.
Part of me feels like what they should have done, maybe, is have the big, like, maybe this is taking place in, like, a scrapyard.
Yeah, what they should have done is have the bulldozer, like, push her into the crusher.
Yeah, or like the big fucking magnet at least.
Yes, exactly. Like, there's a scene, like, the scenes that I kept thinking about, one, in Maxine, which we watched this year, there's a scene where a car gets crushed in a crusher, and it's very good. But of all things, the thing I thought about was Heavy Rain. There's a scene that I think most people have probably forgotten if you've played Heavy Rain, but you get, like, trapped in a car there's a bulldozer pushing you into the car crusher, and you have to escape the car before your car gets junked. And it's like, they should have just done that with Christine. Like, it just would have been really cool. Just have it pushed into the magnet or pushed into the crusher. Just something like that to smaunch Christine. Just completely crunch her.
I'm just gonna be honest. Steven, I love you. You do at least, struggle a little bit in the ending. Maybe you don't always fumble it, but I think that this is definitely one of the weaker kind of, like, Stephen King endings to an extent. I do think that
The last little scare is pretty good with the boombox and like it shows the Christine cube and she's like wiggling.
I do
That's
love that,
creepy.
and I love when Lee just laments, like, I hate rock and roll.
Yeah.
But, you know...
And then they play Bad to the Bone over the credits, so she's right. Fuck rock and roll. Fuck Bad to the Bone.
But I do think that after the big confrontation, it does feel a little bit like one, Stephen kind of wrote himself into a corner. Two, they could probably have just done like another take with the ending.
Yeah.
But honestly, like, I think this is just so fun of a movie anyways.
Yeah, it's just fun, man. This movie's fun.
I fucking love the tragic yaoi and
Yes.
Yandere Car aspect.
Yeah, Yandere Car, tragic yaoi. I mean, there's things that I would do to improve this movie. I'm not going to call it an all-timer like I did with Carrie, but this is a lot of fun. And I think partially this is kind of a huge appeal of why Stephen King's stories and their movies have such cultural impact. They're digestible. They're enjoyable. They're kind of spooky. They often have like some striking idea or image that sticks with you, even if the story's not the best.
I would not have pushed for Christine if I didn't genuinely love it.
Exactly.
If I was to represent 80s a horror king on our podcast with one film, like, this is the one that I want to pick. It has got so much cult appeal. It appeals to us, if you can't tell.
Yes.
And, you know, on top of it, I love the themes of this. So I'd say that ultimately it's just, you know, a critique on this idea that Artie is idolizing this time that most people can recognize now is, you know, ugly. Christine is the 50s, both like the good and the bad. One thing that he constantly ends up repeating is, why does everybody hate my car? Why, like, you're all just jealous of my car.
Yeah.
And, you know, this is something that I think the novel does a great job at highlighting, considering the fact that he's possessed by this bitter war veteran who had, like, served in the war. Like, yeah, obviously that kind of guy is like this, but believes in this man's world.
Yeah, again, the vicious misogyny that comes out. It's kind of preying on this teenage misogyny and, like, you know, seeing women literally as objects, you know, and vice versa, I guess. You know, you could probably make a really interesting salient point about objectification here. You know, that's not what we decided to tackle necessarily, but I do think that's an interesting discussion that deserves to be had. You know, and kind of when you compare it into, like, you know, what was the 50s really like? Well, not great for a lot of people.
If we don't get another episode out before December 25th, I just want you to know we wish you all a very Merry Christine.
I think that about wraps it up. I want to thank everyone for listening. This is a lot of fun. We're really looking forward to the next few Stephen King episodes. Who doesn't like a visit from Chris Kingle this holiday season? I'm sorry, I just bit your joke. I hope that's okay.
It's fine.
But yeah, so as usual, if you want to find us, you can always listen to us on Spotify or YouTube, or on the RSS reader of your choice on Pocket Casts, Apple Podcast. Again, you can find us at armbarstudios.com. We are Armbar Studios. I have been Aaron. She has been Mandy. And until next time.
3, 2, 1, roll credits.
You guys are still here.
Roll Credits is produced by Armbar Studios and is part of the Aaron and Mandy Network. The intro and outro music is provided by Daniel Vodovos, available on Bandcamp. For more information on all of our projects, visit armbarstudios.com.